Western script, Eastern reality. This is the algorithm. Rewrite the rules. January 11th, 2026. History will remember this day, not for a declaration of war, but for the death of a logic that once ruled the world. For 30 years, the East leveraged a near-infinite supply of cheap labor and hyper-efficient assembly lines to forge itself into the indispensable world's factory. In that era, a massive population was an asset. A landscape of factories was a strategic chip. But all of that was formatted into irrelevance the moment the AI singularity arrived.
People are still counting how many robots the East has, boasting that their production volume is #1 in the world. That kind of thinking is stuck in the industrial age. The East won the hardware race, but they lost the future. Why do I say the world's factory has become a liability? Because labor is no longer a competitive advantage. It's a burden. When the West's TeslaBot solved the final 1% of AI generalization, robots stopped needing humans to write code for every task. They began to learn through observation and simulation, mastering complex processes in a single second. Suddenly, the East's great wall of flesh, workers who need to eat, rest, collect social security, and occasionally rebel, became a drag on productivity.
The logic of production has undergone a fundamental inversion. In the past, the West relied on the East because Westerners were too expensive. Today, the West abandons the East because robots are cheaper, more precise, and more obedient than any slave-driving factory in the East. When industrial production can happen right next to the consumer market, closed in a loop where robots build robots, the East's massive industrial infrastructure, its sprawling logistics chains, and even the hundreds of millions of people who depend on those factories instantly become dead assets, unmarketable and rapidly devaluing.
In the past, the East could threaten the West with strikes or supply chain disruptions. But in 2026, the West will simply say, be our guest. When Western factories operate with zero human presence, only a steel army working 24/7, the East's only remaining advantage, hard work, becomes worthless in the face of absolute algorithms. You think you're still a threat? I'm sorry, but in the eyes of the West, you are just a relic of a bygone era, a massive entity that consumes energy but produces zero surplus value. The more factories you have, the more energy you drain, and the faster your competitiveness collapses. That is the truth behind the liability.
Every hegemony in human history was ultimately limited by a single bottleneck: productivity. Rome, as powerful as it was, required slaves. The British Empire, as vast as it was, required colonies. But by 2026, the West shattered these shackles with its own hands. The moment the first TeslaBot assembled another identical and even self-optimized robot, the God mode of productivity was activated. This is the loop of the steel slaves.
The East loves to boast about their full supply chain. They believe that because they know how to manufacture everything, the West can never leave them. But they've overlooked one fatal fact. Human assembly efficiency has a physical limit. Eastern factories need light, air conditioning, dormitories, and most importantly, time to train workers. But the West's dark factories need nothing. Once an Optimus unit is trained in virtual space, its experiences instantly sync to millions of robots globally. When machines can produce machines 24/7 without error, the West's total output doesn't grow linearly. It explodes exponentially. This is a kinetic strike launched by the laws of physics.
This closed loop signifies one thing. The West has officially achieved resource self-sufficiency. As production costs drop toward zero and logistics distances shrink to a few kilometers, the West's trade dependency on the East collapsed in a matter of months. In the past, the West bought from the East because it was cheap. Now the West realizes that even the cheapest Eastern goods, when burdened with shipping costs and political risks, are more expensive than products made by their own robotic armies. This decoupling isn't a political decision. It is pure economic annihilation.
Look at these soldiers. They don't ask why, they only execute. The ultimate irony is that the East is still exporting hardware components, thinking they're still turning a profit. They don't realize that every screw they sell to the West will eventually become a link in the chain that locks them out. Once the West possesses an infinite self-replicating workforce, they no longer need to share the spoils with the East. The world will be split in two: a steel civilization with infinite capacity, and a flesh wasteland holding onto empty factories and millions of idle workers with nowhere to apply their strength.
The 2026 singularity is more than a technological leap. It is a silent eviction notice. The West has used robots to build an invisible industrial wall, completely isolating the East from the global value chain. Throwing a tantrum? When you can't even see your opponent's face and are forced to confront an endless self-regenerating army of steel, a tantrum is nothing more than a powerless act of self-destruction. If self-replication is the sword the West uses to seize productivity, then Starlink, coupled with high-orbit compute satellites, is the digital cage cast over the world. In 2026, the East finally confronts a brutal reality. While their robotic factories still rely on traditional ground stations and compromised fiber optic networks, the entire sky has already become the private cloud of the West.
People talked about the East leading in 5G. They praised the hardware of their robots, but they failed to understand that the robots of the future do not fight as lone units. They operate through swarm intelligence. A robot's brain resides in the cloud, and we hold the ticket to that cloud. Through Starlink 2.0, the West can define at the physical layer who gets to connect and who gets formatted. The East wants to throw a tantrum? They can't even update their robots' instruction sets. When the West activates global data isolation, those millions of Eastern robots become nothing more than blind giants, capable of walking a few steps in their own backyard, but useless for anything else.
This is a deprivation of sovereignty never before seen in history. The West doesn't need to send troops to occupy Eastern factories. They only need to press a single button in orbit to paralyze the East's entire automated production system. Even more insidious is that every robot manufactured in the East and sold abroad is in fact a Western Trojan horse. Because the underlying commands and the core algorithms of the AI training models were all defined by the West. At any moment, the West can turn those exported robots against their creators, or simply turn them into bricks.
This is what we call isolation. The East will find itself severed from the global chain of AI evolution. While Western robots share experiences and evolve billions of times a day over high-speed Starlink links, Eastern robots will stagnate within their own closed, data-starved local networks. The gap that was once months will widen to 50 years in an instant. How do you fight an opponent whose evolution speed is 10,000 times faster than yours? You can't even catch their shadow.
By 2026, the East has become a technological island. They possess all the industrial heritage of the past, but have lost the protocols to connect to the future. The Skynet woven by Starlink is not just for communication. It is to establish a digital order where existence is only possible with Western approval. The silence of the East is not because they have nothing to say. It is because their mouthpieces have been completely formatted. Any form of resistance requires material sustenance. When the East attempted to activate its massive mechanized divisions and automated factories for one final gamble. They struck the hardest wall in existence: physical reality. In 2026, the West initiated a physical liquidation. By executing precision blockades on global resource nodes, they tightened an energy noose around the East that left no room for breath.
You want to throw a tantrum? First, you need oil. You need electricity. You need rare earths. But look at the map. Who is guarding the Venezuelan wells now? Who is patrolling the Iranian export terminals? Who is excavating the mines of Greenland? When the West achieves point-to-point resource control via robotic armies, the East becomes a Ferrari without fuel. It doesn't matter if your robots can line up all the way to the moon if you lack the power to turn them on. A tantrum? With what? Your factories that are about to lose power? Or your iron ore that's stuck 10,000 miles away?
This is suffocation at the material level. The West used Starlink to lock down the East's brain, and then utilized global carrier strike groups and autonomous submersibles to sever its veins. The East discovered that its vaunted watchdog defense strategy, designed to protect its own doorstep, was utterly powerless against a globalized resource cutoff. You can guard your front door, but you cannot protect an oil field on the other side of the planet. When the West declared global resources to be under security escrow, the East's economic engine suffered a historic thrombosis.
The masterstroke is that the West no longer needs the East's markets, nor its assembly lines. Since the West has self-replicating robots, why would it sell resources to a potential enemy just so they can build weapons to strike back? It's a simple math problem. The West chose total decoupling. The East will find itself entering an unprecedented resource drought. You want to move your military? Every gallon of fuel used by your tanks is drawn from your final life savings. When your strategic reserves hit zero, you haven't just lost a war. You've lost the ability to function as a civilization. The masterstroke is that the West no longer needs the East's markets, nor its assembly lines. Since the West has self-replicating robots, why would it sell resources to a potential enemy just so they can build weapons to strike back? It's a simple math problem. The West chose total decoupling. The East will find itself entering an unprecedented resource drought. You want to move your military? Every gallon of fuel used by your tanks is drawn from your final life savings. When your strategic reserves hit zero, you haven't just lost a war. You've lost the ability to function as a civilization.
By the end of 2026, as the final data packet from the East is intercepted by the firewall, and their weight in global resource allocation drops to zero, human history officially fractures. This wasn't a bloody war of attrition. It was a silent, civilizational erasure. By leveraging the robotic singularity, total compute monopoly, and physical resource blockades, the West has successfully severed human society into two entirely disconnected dimensions. By the end of 2026, as the final data packet from the East is intercepted by the firewall, and their weight in global resource allocation drops to zero, human history officially fractures. This wasn't a bloody war of attrition. It was a silent, civilizational erasure. By leveraging the robotic singularity, total compute monopoly, and physical resource blockades, the West has successfully severed human society into two entirely disconnected dimensions. This is the era of new technocracy. Those who command compute and an infinite army of steel slaves are the gods of the new age. The West no longer needs to negotiate. Rules are defined by algorithms, and order is maintained by satellites. The East is left in a past of flesh and blood and scarcity, while the West takes a one-way ticket to the stars. After 2026, there are only two types of people: those who define the future, and those formatted by it.
The game was decided the moment Optimus took its first step. The East lost because they thought quantity could defeat algorithms. The formatting is complete. If you are hearing this, you are still on the survival list of this evolution. So tell me, will you be a god or a liability?
The curtain is just rising on the great formatting of 2026. If you want to continue exploring the power maps of the next 50 years and the truth behind the robotic revolution, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this with friends who haven't woken up yet. Don't wait until you're being formatted to realize you've lost your ticket to the future. We'll see you in the next episode.